was primarily culpable for Jesus' death. Are many religious leaders today also guilty of crucifying Jesus on a cross of worldly values? Why did Jesus say it was finished? Let's look at John 19. If Pilate found Jesus not guilty, why did he have Jesus flogged? Then Pilate took Jesus and flogged him, and the soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head and arrayed him in a purple robe. They came up to him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews," and struck him with their hands. Pilate went out again and said to them, "See, I'm bringing him out to you, that you may know that I find no guilt in him." Pilate knew that Jesus was innocent, but what did the religious leaders shout? Then Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. Pilate said to them, "Here is the man." When the chief priests and the temple police saw him, they shouted, "Crucify, crucify!" Pilate responded, "Take him and crucify him yourselves, for I find no grounds for charging him." "We have a law," the Jews replied to him, "and according to that law he must die, because he made himself the Son of God." Who did Jesus say had the greater sin? The religious leaders or civil leaders? Is that still the case today? When Pilate heard this, he became even more afraid. Returning to his headquarters, he asked Jesus, "Where are you from?" But Jesus didn't answer him. So Pilate asked him, "Aren't you going to speak to me? You realize, don't you, that I have the authority to release you and the authority to crucify you?" Jesus answered him, "You have no authority over me at all, except what was given to you from above. That's why the one who handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin." What shocking thing did the religious leaders admit about who their king really was? Do religious leaders often still put worldly politics above obedience to God? And from thenceforth Pilate sought to release him, but the Jews cried out, saying, "If you let this man go, you're not Caesar's friend. Whosoever makes himself a king speaks against Caesar." When Pilate therefore heard that saying, he brought Jesus forth and sat down in the judgment seat, in a place that's called the Pavement, but in the Hebrew Gabbatha. And it was the preparation of the Passover, about the 6th hour. And he said to the Jews, "Behold your king." But they cried out, "Away with him, crucify him." Pilate said to them, "Shall I crucify your king?" The chief priests answered, "We have no king but Caesar." Then he delivered him therefore to them, to be crucified. And they took Jesus and led him away. Was truth finally written on the cross, despite the religious leaders' objections? They took Jesus, therefore, and he went out bearing his own cross, to the place called the place of a skull, which is called in Hebrew Golgotha. There they crucified him, and with him 2 other men, one on either side, and Jesus in between. And Pilate also wrote an inscription, and put it on the cross. It was written, "Jesus the Nazarene, the King of the Jews." Therefore many of the Jews read this inscription, for the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city, and it was written in Hebrew, Latin, and in Greek. So the chief priests of the Jews were saying to Pilate, "Don't write the King of the Jews," but that he said, "I'm King of the Jews." Pilate answered, "What I've written, I've written." What did the soldiers do with Jesus' clothing? Did Jesus wear quality clothing or rags? Then the soldiers, when they'd crucified Jesus, took his outer garments and made 4 parts, a part to each soldier, and the tunic also. But the tunic was seamless, woven in one piece. So they said to one another, "Let's not tear it, but cast lots for it, to decide whose it shall be." This happened so that the scripture would be fulfilled. They divided my garments among themselves, and they cast lots for my clothing. Therefore the soldiers did these things. As the oldest son, did Jesus provide for his now widowed mother? Why John? And why not one of Jesus' brothers? Were his brothers not at the cross? Were they not converted until later? Is the Christian family bigger than blood alone? Near the cross of Jesus stood his mother's sister, Mary the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother there, and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to her, "Woman, here's your son," and to the disciple, "Here's your mother." From that time on, this disciple took her into his home. What were Jesus' final words? What was he declaring was finished? After this, Jesus, knowing that all things were now accomplished, that the scripture might be fulfilled, said, "I thirst." Now a vessel full of sour wine was sitting there, and they filled a sponge with sour wine, put it on hyssop, and put it to his mouth. So when Jesus had received the sour wine, he said, "It's finished." And bowing his head, he gave up his spirit. Was Jesus' death pictured in the Passover lamb? Was this a double Sabbath, both a Saturday and the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread? Opinions vary. It was the day of preparation, and the Jewish leaders didn't want the bodies hanging there the next day, which was the Sabbath, and a very special Sabbath, because it was Passover week. So they asked Pilate to hasten their deaths by ordering that their legs be broken. Then their bodies could be taken down. So the soldiers came and broke the legs of the two men crucified with Jesus. But when they came to Jesus, they saw that he was already dead, so they didn't break his legs. One of the soldiers, however, pierced his side with a spear, and immediately blood and water flowed out. This report is from an eyewitness, giving an accurate account. He speaks the truth, so that you also may continue to believe. These things happened in fulfillment of the scriptures that say, "Not one of his bones will be broken," and they'll look on the one they pierced. What did Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus do with Jesus' body? After these things, Joseph of Arimathea, being a disciple of Jesus, but secretly for fear of the Jews, asked of Pilate that he might take away Jesus' body. Pilate gave him permission. He came therefore and took away his body. Nicodemus, who at first came to Jesus by night, also came bringing a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 100 Roman pounds. So they took Jesus' body and bound it in linen cloths with the spices, as the custom of the Jews is to bury. Now in the place where he was crucified there was a garden. In the garden was a new tomb, in which no man had ever yet been laid. Then because of the Jews' preparation day, for the tomb was near at hand, they laid Jesus there. Who was primarily culpable for Jesus' death? Are many religious leaders today also guilty of crucifying Jesus on a cross of worldly values? Why did Jesus say it was finished? You decide.